If anyone deserves to be honored, it's my mother, the one who never abandoned me when the whole world turned its back.
Asira stepped into the center of the square. The crowd erupted in thunderous applause. In that moment, memories flooded the heart of the girl who once lived at the very bottom of society, the windy nights in the House of Wind, the cries of a newborn amidst the storm, the desperate escapes through sacred forests. Before her were thousands of eyes, no longer filled with scorn or doubt, but with absolute admiration. Asira didn't cry, but her hands trembled slightly. The pain of the past had now turned into a radiant light. She didn't need a throne, for the boy she had raised was now the torch of hope, and that was the greatest reward of all. Loudspeaker, you're following a touching and unexpected journey in the series Tales of Old Africa. If you love profound and humanistic legends, don't forget to like and subscribe to catch all the latest episodes.
The land of Xantora stretched across the heart of ancient Africa, where the sun blazed like fire over rolling dunes, and the beat of leather drums echoed whenever the tribe gathered beneath the 1,000-year-old baobab tree. At the helm of this land stood Chief Nkosi, a man of great wealth, power, and fearsome presence, as revered and dreaded as the gods the villagers prayed to. Despite owning rare white elephants, commanding hundreds of loyal warriors, and storing vast granaries of golden grain, Nkosi bore a silent torment. He had no heir. 3 wives, countless sacrificial rituals, and the oldest shaman's most potent herbs, all had failed him. One night, through the thick smoke rising from the campfire, the fortune-teller Azaro spoke, after chewing through an entire piece of sacred root. Your successor, Chief, will not come from the womb of a noblewoman, but will rise from the dust, nameless, homeless. Yet the child will bear the mark of royalty on their forehead. Nkosi said nothing, but his eyes wavered, as though those words had awakened something deep within. From that night on, he quietly sent people throughout the land, searching for the girl from the dust, a metaphor that sounded like madness to most. Weeks later, on the outskirts of Kimbala village, Asira sat by a dry stream, knees hugged to her chest. A frail young girl, hair tangled, body covered in dirt. The villagers whispered that she was possessed after her mother's death, a poor healer accused of casting the wrong spell and burned in the marketplace. Since then, Asira had been cast out, living like a shadow on the fringes. Suddenly, the ground trembled softly. The distant drums began to echo. A procession on horseback approached, led by a man in a leopard skin robe, his head wrapped in red cloth adorned with white ostrich feathers, Nkosi. Asira looked up, fear in her eyes, but did not flee. "What is your name?" Nkosi's voice rumbled like thunder. "Asira," she replied softly, eyes lowered. "You have no home, no husband, no one who calls your name when night falls. Is that true?" Asira remained silent. The wind hissed through the dry branches, as if holding its breath. "I will give you shelter, food, clothes, and gold, but on one condition. You will bear me a child." Asira was stunned. She couldn't tell if this was a cruel joke or the will of the gods. "Why me?" she whispered. "Because fate has chosen you. And I believe in the word of the spirits." She looked into the eyes of the powerful man before her. Deep within, there was no lust, only a sorrow barely concealed. Later that day, Asira sat alone in a cloth-draped carriage as the procession escorted her to the Eastern Palace, a secluded wing, far from the royal court. She knew that from this moment on, her life no longer belonged to her. But also, in that moment, a destiny far greater than herself had begun. Asira stood quietly under the waning sunlight, watching Nkosi's silhouette recede into the distance. Her heart pulled in all directions, torn between fear and an uncanny sense that fate was knocking at her door. That night, she was led to a private tent lit by oil lamps and carpeted with fibers from the royal looms. When Nkosi entered, he carried no symbols of power, no scepter, no guards. Only a man, eyes heavy with burden, shoulders slumped from too many years of waiting. "You may refuse," he said, voice low and hoarse. "I won't force you, but if you agree, the child will never be nameless." Asira didn't answer right away. She placed a hand over her chest, where her heart pounded. Suddenly, she remembered her mother's words. There are choices that may cost you everything, but they might also be the only thing that keeps you alive. She nodded, not for the gold, not for status, but because of a deep intuition that this child would change something. That night, in a simple room as quiet as an ancient ritual, there were no sweet words, only two souls. One bearing the loneliness of power, the other carrying the wounds of the forgotten, sharing the one thing they had left between them, hope. The Eastern Palace, also known as the House of Wind, was a secluded compound on the edge of the sacred forest. Once a convalescence home for aging priests, it had now become Asira's residence. There were no guards, no servants. Only an old blind man named Bako, once the chief's childhood music teacher, now forgotten in this wind-swept corner of the royal grounds. On her first day, Asira curled up in a corner of the house, clutching a rope bracelet, the last keepsake of her mother. Fear surrounded her like bats circling the rooftop at dusk. One day, when the first signs of life began to show. "What will you name it?" Bako asked, his voice warm and slow. "I don't know yet. Maybe Zuberi. In my mother's tongue, it means strength." "Strength is good," Bako nodded. "But don't forget to teach it silence. Because sometimes, silence can save an entire bloodline." Asira looked at him. In those clouded eyes was a lifetime of experience, one that had once brushed power, only to be buried by time and abandonment. 6 months into the pregnancy. Her belly was now unmistakably round, yet not a single soul from the main palace had come to visit. One night, a storm rolled in. The wind howled through the thatched roof, carrying with it roars like wild beasts. Asira dreamed of a woman in a cloak made of bird feathers, standing alone in a blazing desert. This child does not belong to him. It belongs to the land, to the people. Don't let them turn it into a symbol. Let it become a person. Asira woke up, drenched in cold sweat, her hands wrapped around her belly. "Zuberi, do you hear me? You must live, not to be king, but to be human." The day of birth. That night, the sky over Zantora was unlike any night in memory. The moon vanished, as if too afraid to witness what was to come. The clouds did not form a blanket but twisted into a giant, all-seeing eye high above. Winds rose in waves, like the whispers of ancestors, slipping through the trees and falling silent at the doorstep of the hut where Asira writhed in labor. A bolt of lightning tore through the heavens, not striking the ground, but flashing midair, painting a triangle of fire across the sky for a fleeting moment. Storm clouds gathered like a wall of iron. Bako lit a fire, laid fresh leaves on the floor, and prepared with trembling hands. There were no royal physicians, no court medicines. Only whispered prayers, and a mother's instinct. "Awa!" Asira screamed through the pain. Thunder roared across the sky, and then a cry broke through. High-pitched, piercing, stronger than the thunder itself. "It's a boy!" Bako exclaimed, voice shaking with joy. And, oh heavens, look at his forehead! Right between Zuberi's brows was a birthmark, a deep red, upside-down triangle, identical to the emblem carved into the throne of Nkosi's bloodline. Asira didn't cry. She simply whispered, "Fate has chosen you, but I will never let them take you." At the main palace, hours later, when word reached the royal wives, one woman, Mbala, once Nkosi's first and most beloved consort, hurled a censer to the ground in fury. A filthy woman from the dust? A bastard child, daring to claim the throne? That boy must die, before he learns to walk. And so, the shadows began to gather. 3 days after Zuberi's birth, the skies over Zantora shifted in an eerie way. Thin white clouds turned pitch black, and thunder roared at midday under a blazing sun. The people whispered of omens, while inside the palace, Chief Nkosi lay silently in bed, as if all life had been drained from him. Main palace, third night. "Chief, can you hear me?" The old seer Azaro whispered as he knelt beside the bed. Nkosi opened his eyes and nodded weakly. "Your son has been born." but the old blood is waiting, ready to devour the new. The chief turned his head slowly. He grasped the royal bracelet engraved with the family symbol and struggled to lift his arm, passing it to Azaro. If I don't live to see the naming ceremony, keep this. Give it to the boy when the time comes. Just hours later, Chief Nkosi breathed his last. The next morning, news spreads. The chief's death sent shockwaves through the palace. Mourning drums boomed across the land. But within the inner chambers, plots were already taking shape. Mbala, the first wife, known for her cunning and influence, summoned the remaining consorts. The throne stands empty. Do you want your daughters to kneel before a dust-born woman? One concubine hesitated. But he is the chief's blood. Blood must come from a worthy womb. That child must not live to become a symbol. If we don't act, we will lose everything. Meanwhile, at the House of Wind, Asira sensed something approaching. Not through instinct, but in Bako's eyes, as he quietly began sealing each door and window. Bako, you know something, don't you? We must leave. Tonight. Before the moon rises. Why? Because they won't wait for dawn, Asira. And if we stay, both you and your son will die. The escape. That night, in silence, Asira wrapped Zuberi in a brown cloth, hiding him in an old sack tied to her back. Bako led the way, relying on memory and experience, taking them along a forgotten forest trail he once used in his younger days, when he fled disgrace as a fallen court singer. Behind them, torches flickered in the distance. The barking of dogs and the pounding of hooves echoed like death drums. Faster! Bako urged. They're closing in. My son can't breathe. Asira paused, reaching to adjust the cloth. No. Just a few more steps. They crossed a dry stream and slipped into the sacred forest, a place no one dared enter, rumored to be home to ancient forest spirits. There, beneath the damp darkness of giant roots, they vanished. The next morning, at the main palace, a servant reported, Lady Mbala, the child is gone. Lady Asira disappeared into the sacred forest. The sacred forest. Mbala scoffed. If they survived, it's only a matter of time. The gods don't protect the seeds of rebellion. But what she didn't know was this. The very gods she mocked were now watching every step. 12 years later, deep within the sacred Ndanu forest, life in the forest was not easy. Asira and Zuberi lived in a small palm-thatched hut beside a cool, ever-flowing stream. They survived by growing wild greens, foraging for forest fruit, and setting traps for small game. Every day was a lesson. Zuberi learned to read the sky to predict the weather, to listen to birdsong to sense the presence of intruders. He developed an uncanny ability to feel distant movements, and sometimes he dreamed of things that later came true. One morning, when Zuberi had just turned 10. Mother, why can't I play with other children? He asked, holding a wooden bow Bako had made for him. Asira looked at her son, her eyes briefly clouded with sadness. Because you're special, Zuberi. Not everyone understands what they can't explain. But one day, they'll need the very thing that makes you different. Bako chuckled as he carved wood nearby. And by that time, we'll make sure this boy doesn't just hunt well, but speaks well too. A leader must wield not only the sword, but also the word. Zuberi's eyes widened. What will I become, Grandpa Bako? You'll become yourself, someone unafraid of darkness, and not blinded by light. So every night, after meals of wild greens and river fish, Bako would tell tales of ancient chiefs, while Asira sat silently, stroking her son's hair and whispering words no one else could hear, words only the forest and the moon understood. Zuberi sat quietly on a moss-covered stone, eyes closed, ears attuned to the smallest sounds, falling leaves, running water, the faint breath-like steps of forest animals. Focus. Don't just listen. Feel, Bako's now weak voice rang out, steady as always. The boy had grown into a tall, strong teen, with deep, intelligent eyes, and still bore the red triangular birthmark on his forehead, the one that never let Asira sleep in peace. What do you sense? Bako asked. Someone's here. 5 paces away. Not an animal. They carry the scent of smoke and soil. Zuberi opened his eyes. They're getting closer. A group of woodcutters, entering the sacred forest for the first time, had gotten lost. But Zuberi did not reveal himself. Instead, he used smoke from dried leaves to steer them away. You must never let anyone see your face, Asira warned later. Outsiders won't understand who you are. Then, who am I? Zuberi asked, looking directly at her. She was silent. I'm not like the village kids. I learn faster. See farther. I know when rain is coming, even when the sun is shining. I see places in my dreams, places I've never been. One night under a pale moon, Asira finally told the truth. Zuberi, you are not the son of a pauper. You are the blood of Chief Nkosi, the ruler who once led the kingdom of Zantora. My father was a chief? Zuberi whispered in disbelief. Yes, but you were born out of a bargain, between honor and solitude. And when he died, others tried to erase you from history. Then, what am I? An outcast, or the rightful heir? You are yourself. Never let anyone else define who you are. A few weeks later, an omen of war. Zuberi dreamed of a blood-red sky, burning rooftops, children crying, and a black bird pierced by an arrow falling in the center of a square. The next morning, a group of villagers fleeing from Zantora stumbled into the sacred forest. They told of tragedy. The Mraku tribe is attacking. They're killing everyone, taking land, burning villages. There's no chief left, no one to lead. Zuberi stepped forward, seeing, for the first time, the faces of those who once belonged to his father's people. Hungry, terrified, hopeless. We can't let others swallow our homeland. Zuberi declared. I know the forest. I know how to make them fear what they can't see. Let me lead you. The oldest man in the group, bearing the tattoo of a former royal guard, looked closely at Zuberi's forehead. He murmured, the mark of Nkosi. There's no mistaking it. The night before the uprising. Bako called Zuberi over and handed him a small bundle. This. I've hidden for over 10 years, on your father's orders. Take it to the Red Temple. If the village elders see it, they'll know who you are. Zuberi unwrapped it, a bronze bracelet engraved with 3 mountain peaks, the royal emblem of Zantora. They might believe you, Bako warned. Or they might kill you. If that's the price to save our people, Zuberi replied, then I accept it. A misty morning, on the outskirts of Zantora. Zuberi wore a brown cloak, a wooden bough slung over his shoulder, and a cloth pouch carrying the ancestral bracelet. Behind him marched 20 young men from the villages, once hunters, woodcutters, and herders, now wielding spears and bearing eyes lit with hope. Zuberi led them, not as royalty, but as one with a vision. We don't need to win a war, he said. We just need to remind the people they once had a chief who dared to sacrifice, and a son who never abandoned them. Inside the city, at the Red Temple. Once the sacred site where chiefs were crowned, the Red Temple was now under the control of Mraku warriors. The people lived in fearful silence, while Mbala, now a collaborator with the invaders, clung to power through lies. The old chief died childless. The heavens chose a new one. To resist is to defy the gods, she declared. But then, at midday, the sound of drums echoed from the south. A procession entered the square. At the front was Zuberi, unarmored, holding high the ancestral bracelet. I have not come to reclaim a throne. I've come to remind you, justice is not dead, and truth has not been buried. A murmur rose from the crowd. Guards surged forward. But before a single spear could touch Zuberi, a voice rang out. Wait! I bear witness. This child is the son of Nkosi. It was Azaro, the old seer, raising the sacred axe, the ancient symbol of succession. Mbala screamed. He's a rebel! A bastard! Azaro calmly pulled back Zuberi's cloak. There, on his forehead, the deep red triangular birthmark burned under the sunlight. The mark of destiny. Blood that does not lie. The uprising was bloodless. The people rose. The Mraku soldiers, unable to understand the local language, were surrounded and disarmed. Mbala tried to flee through the eastern gate, but was captured in the chaos. Zuberi did not order her death. Those who live by hatred will die in isolation. Let her live, and witness this kingdom rise again. 1 week later, the coronation ceremony. Zuberi wore the red cloak of his ancestors, standing before thousands. But when Azaro stepped forward with the crown, Zuberi raised a hand to stop him. I did not come to be king. I came to return power to the one who truly deserves it. He stepped down, and led Asira into the center of the square. The dust-born woman, now with strands of silver in her hair, stood tall, eyes shining. This is my mother, the one who gave me life, raised me, and kept me alive when the world turned away. If anyone deserves honor, it is her. Thunderous applause. Drums rang out. The village elders knelt. Years later, beneath the old baobab tree, a circle of children sat around a blind old man, Bako, now nearing 100. And so, from the dust a child rose. Not with blades, but with truth. He didn't just save a kingdom. He taught the world that the path to greatness doesn't begin with a throne, but with courage. A true chief is not one with many wives or much gold, but the one who never abandons his people, even if the world once abandoned him.